You guys have been asking for this for weeks, and I'm finally getting to it. Today we're going to be doing a flip through and review of Exploring the World Through Story Level A, which is meant for the kindergarten level. This is part of a series that goes from about kindergarten currently until I believe about 8th grade. We'll take a look here on the website just to confirm, but I have only used level A with my current kindergartner, and we are only partway through this program. So it is from Stone Soup Press. Drew Campbell here is the author of this program, and when you get your copy, you will see a small little blurb about Drew Campbell. But if you have read How to Homeschool the Kids You Have, they are one of the authors of that book. So they co-authored that, and it is a really good resource, by the way. If you haven't read it, definitely recommend it. So Exploring the World Through Story is a really cool program. The idea here is you are trying to introduce your children to the diversity of human cultures through the study of world literature. And in this early level, level A, which is focusing on that ages 4 to 6 or that kindergarten level, you are exposing your child to world culture through classic fables from Aesop, as well as through pourquoi stories or how and why stories. And the idea here is your child is going to have one short reading each week. There will be some memory work. There will be some map and globe explorations, geography readings. And by the end of the year, the idea is that your children will have explored stories from a number of different cultures. And they should be able to recognize and name the different continents and world oceans. So you have some geography memory work that you're working on that is incorporated into this program. So I want to point out that this program is meant to be a one folktale per week for 36 weeks. So in other words here, this is a supplementary program that you can use on top of your other language arts. So it does not include things like handwriting or phonics. And they even say here that there are definitely, this is only one component of a complete English language arts program. So they do offer suggestions on the different content you should be using as well. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of information here about the lesson plans themselves. They do highlight that you are going to be doing memory work, and they recommend reviewing daily, not just through the weekly literature and geography lessons. But I will say with my older one, we do discuss the memory work kind of off and on, but I have noticed that he is actually more or less like he is still picking up a lot with only a couple of references. We don't do it daily, but it is working. Like he is definitely catching on to the content here. All right, there are only 2 core literature texts that you are required to have. I bought both of mine through thrift books, but I do recommend getting the exact version of Aesop's Fables and How and Why stories that they recommend, because in the book they do reference like what page number to go to, and it definitely makes it a lot easier if you can get your hands on the exact version that you need. So definitely recommend that. They also have this geography reference text that they pull out, this DK countries of the world, and then they do have some additional materials that they recommend for you to refer to throughout the program, but really the core literature text, like that is like, you absolutely need that. You can be a little bit more flexible or creative as a parent if you don't have this countries of the world by pulling up things on the internet or doing research, pulling up YouTube videos, etc. So the other ones I don't find to be as key, but the core, absolutely. So here you can see, here's the schedule. It's going to be 36 weeks, and you will notice that you're flip-flopping every single week. So you'll go from a fable to a pourquoi story, fable, pourquoi story, so on and so forth. And then here's where we're going to highlight what geography facts your student is going to cover throughout the year. So we're going to be talking about the differences between globes and maps, for example, our cardinal directions, our continents, oceans, and so on and so forth. And there are a couple things that we also independently have added into this memory work time that I think it's actually a really good time to practice things outside of this as well, such as like your parents' phone number, things like that. So that's not in here, but it fits in really nicely because you're going to be focusing on your home address as well. Okay, so here's an example. This is the very first lesson here, and this is exactly how all of them are formatted. So it's going to start with the lesson here. The lesson number is going to have the level, which is A, and then the lesson number. It's going to tell you the name of the story that you're working on, as well as the page number from the text, and it's going to highlight which country you're going to be focusing on or exposing your child to in this lesson. Now, there is a big chunk of teaching notes here, and I highly recommend you as the parent reading through this before you sit down with your child. It's going to give you kind of the background. It's going to kind of tell you what your goal for the lesson is. And then what it does do is it gives you some scripted things that you're going to say to your child, which is really, really handy. So this is a lot of text. Your child's not going to hear all of this text. This is mostly for you, and then you are going to read the bolded text out loud to your child. Now, they have some vocabulary, and the way that we incorporate it is as I read, I kind of keep my eyes out for this. So if it says, like, I don't know, the dog immediately ran, then I say, and we know immediately means right away. So I kind of explain what it is in the moment. I do not drill them on vocabulary, but I use this as a good reference to like highlight some terms that we might want to emphasize, so that way the meaning is not lost on the story. We then have our reading comprehension questions, which are amazing. They are short and brief, and they are easy for the child to have a conversation on. I feel like they're not trying to trick your child. It's more, they're just basic comprehension questions. But they also do ask things, though. It's not just understanding like the sequence of things, like this one here, like, why did the old mouse ask who would bell the cat? And really, you have to kind of come up with the answer by more or less hearing the clues in the context of the story. And then they also ask personal questions for you to expand upon. Now, underneath the questions, we do not always do this, but there is always going to be like a connections section. And let me go to the one that has like a science connections. Here we go. It's going to have a connection sections, and the how and why stories have, I would say, more of a scientific connection in general of what we have noticed so far. So this one here, why do tigers get their stripes? They even point out in the how and why book that they're going to explain the real reason why tigers have stripes and what they do. And then they provide links to different nonfiction books or nonfiction websites that you and your child can explore to dive into maybe the science topic that is covered, that's connected to your reading, so on and so forth. And then this here is also where they put in, let's see if I can find an example. No, I can't see an example. But sometimes they also throw, like in the map work and reading here, connections to different countries and things that you'll be pulling out those other reference books for. So you'll have your connections, which are really nice little tangents that you can go down, like down these rabbit holes, but it's not required. And then you have your geography work. So it's locating the country you're talking about on the map for the first time. It's also reading about the country if it's applicable. Aesop's fables, which all take, Aesop is from Greece, so you're not finding Greece every single time. But it's more of those how and why stories. That's where you typically will be going to a particular location. So here we have, like, this one's Korea, so we found the Korean peninsula, and then we read a little bit about from the geography text as well. Okay, so below that you're going to have some memory work. And a lot of these questions are going to, in fact, all of these questions are going to build upon each other. So you can see in lesson 30, you're going to have a lot more memory work that you are working on than you do at the very beginning. But for the entire duration of this curriculum, for example, you will always be talking about these same questions. So we have, let's actually go near the end here so you can see like the final the final list here, but you're talking about what a world map is, a globe, directions. You're going to be your child will finish certain sentences like what their country is, their capital of the country, the state they're in, the capital of the state, address, what kind of land you are on, continents, so on and so forth. In the back here, we have some calendars that are not, these are not calendars, these are maps. In the back here, we have some maps that you will be referred to. So if you don't have your own map, or if you would like to maybe color or mark specific locations, this is a really good resource to utilize. So you can see at map number 1, so M1 is going to be an empty map. So nothing is going to be listed. This is a good reference point for your children and you if you want to locate the countries. We then have map 2, or M2, is going to be our continent map, and then map 3 is going to be our ocean map. So these are all things that you're going to use throughout. I would say total, you guys, it takes us about 20 minutes. I would say, yeah, about 20 minutes for us to finish a full lesson here for each week. And sometimes it takes longer, and that is only because my children are loving the conversation that we are having, or they're loving the connection, the rabbit holes that we are going down. So we just naturally spend more time. It is not a drag, and my kids do not dig their heels in because it is difficult to do. So let's go ahead now. I'm going to turn you around and we'll talk a little bit more about the program face to face. All right, before we wrap up with my conclusion here, I do want to show you guys the books that are actually called out that you will need that we had talked about in our flip through. So the first book that you are going to need is this one here, Aesop's Fables for Children, and then also the How and Why stories, and they're both very thin. And the stories that you will read each week are also very small. They're brief, which I really enjoy. So here we have just a random page. We have one story that's a column and a half. We have another story that's just 2 paragraphs, and then we have a full page. Now, not every single story is going to have artwork, but many of them do. And the artwork itself is kind of that classical style that you typically see in a lot of, I would say, like almost Charlotte Mason style book selections. So I do really enjoy the Aesop's Fables. My kids love them as well. Again, very fast reads. Now the How and Why stories is set up a little bit differently here. So you do typically, here's a random story, you do typically get a short story that's going to be I would say 1 to 2 pages on average, between 1 and 2 pages on average, and you'll get one picture that's black and white, so there's no color in here. And then what I love about these is it follows up with an about the story section, which takes almost the scientific or the cultural details that are talked about in that book, and they kind of explain it. So for example, this one is about tiger stripes, and it says about the story, and it tells you why tiger stripes are actually there, and it has some additional prompts that you can do to talk about that with your child, or it will give you different resources for you to take a look at with your child to learn more about maybe the science behind these how and why stories. And then they also offer a whole section for the tips for telling. So I actually like looking at this beforehand because it kind of gives me an idea of places to emphasize, things to make it a little bit more fun and exciting. And those are fun, but not required. And that about the story section is typically what connects to the connections inside the curriculum itself. Now, the other book that is called out is this Countries of the World from DK, which is actually called out by a lot of different curriculum pieces out there. But they're just typically spreads about the different country. Some countries take up like 2 pages. Some take up like a quarter of a page. It is definitely, let me see if I can find one. Yeah, like here, France takes up like 2 whole pages. But here we have 3 countries on the same amount of space. So each country is not, each country has different amount of content in this book. This book we do really like. Again, it's called out in a lot of different pieces of curriculum that's out there. We do like it as a reference book, but if you didn't have this book or you can't get your hands on it pretty affordably, then it definitely is something that I feel like you can, as the parent, improvise a different way to explore the country with your children if needed. Now let's talk a little bit about cost. Right now, Exploring the World Through Story is about $49 on stonesupress.com, and I believe that is what I paid for it as well. So when you buy it, you get a digital copy. It's like a PDF, and I chose to have it printed. But you could easily, if you chose not to print, you don't have to print, obviously, but it's a PDF version. And cost-wise, it's not the cheapest. Let's be real, it's not the cheapest. But I feel like this is such a good program. So here's my thoughts. Here's the actual review. It is such a good program, and it is definitely worth the cost. I feel like the stories, the works of literature that were selected are perfect for the age range. I think it's really nice having a succinct, shortish, like short story or short, short thing that you're reading through, where you're following that up with a couple of questions, some that are just black and white, are you listening? And then others like, okay, well, what can you deduce from the information within the story? And then there are other questions where your child has to think about how it applies to them. The questions are really good, I feel like, but they don't take too long, which is really nice. They're perfect at this age to just have a discussion. And I just feel like that discussion of the literature is definitely, I don't know, it's really good. Now, for a comparison here, we had purchased another reading comprehension program that we were using called Jacob's Ladder, and that is also kind of targets the same age range. But I felt those questions were a lot longer, and they were digging so much in the technicality of stories that it felt more like work. This does not feel as much of work as it does like you're just prompting really healthy discussions, and I really enjoyed that. So I definitely would recommend it. We are at like not halfway through the program yet. I think we're on week 14 or something like that. We are really enjoying it. It is not something I have received any pushback on from my child. And in fact, my preschool age child does like to also sit there and listen, and he is able to have some of those conversations as well. So our intention is to go through it all the way with kindergartner. At this point in time, I'm already looking at, as we get a little bit further through, looking at how we can incorporate level B into our first grade year. And I'm really looking forward to also exploring more with this same book with my second child. So definitely 10 out of 10. I would definitely recommend it at this point in time. And of course, if my feelings on this topic change, I will definitely link something down below. But it's really solid, and I would recommend it. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around. I hope you have a wonderful day and you're staying cozy in this winter, staying hopefully sickness-free. It's definitely moving rampant out here. But I will talk to you guys later, and you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.